Hey! สวัสดีครับ and welcome to the first MFA Inter School Debating Championship 2021. My name is Patera Angsasuk Naramon from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Thailand and my friend Bogea Kunchan. Welcome everyone and thank you for tuning in. We're here at the MFA Inter-School Debating Championship.
Okay.
Previously, 25 debating teams from 14 schools across Thailand have been debating on various topics ranging from economics, environment, and global affairs. And we're now down to two final teams. Bogea Kunchan, do you want to know who are the two finalists? Yes, right? Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let us meet the first team from Anglo Singapore International School.
Hello, I'm Thanasit Siwamong Lakana from Team Anglo-Centric and also President of Anglo-Singapore International Schools Debate Society. Our school is an academic-oriented school and the teachers are extremely close to every single student in their class, making learning an interactive process with constant discussions about our studies. Our school also offers multiple activities for students to do in addition to our academics. To me, the most attractive activity is debate because our school is renowned for its debating prowess both in domestic and international tournaments. Our debating lessons are intense, eye-opening, and full of support from our coaches that try their very best to bring out the best of our potential. And we are all very thankful for that. Ever since I started debating in secondary 2, I have learned extremely valuable things. For example, leadership skills, teamwork skills, and critical thinking skills, all of which I would be using for the rest of my life.
Hi, my name is Raya and I'm Anglo-centric.
Hi, I'm Anglo-centric as well, and my name is Yunbing. We're here today to talk about some things that we've learned because of debate.
So to those of y'all new to debate, it's recommended to take advantage of online tournaments, especially international ones, because they tend to have really great judges from all across the world, and they can also be less scary if you'd rather ease into the whole human interaction and public speaking aspect.
There are so many different formats of debate that you can try out. For example, the formats that we're both most familiar with are AP and World Schools, where each team consists of 3 to 5 debaters. There's also British Parliamentary, where there are 2 debaters within each team, and within each debate there are 4 teams. You still have 2 sides, but you compete with the other 3 teams to be ranked higher.
There are also more subtle differences in each format. For example, more theoretical or non-consequentialist principle arguments are more accepted in BP, while World Schools is going to focus more on impacts and utility. You also don't have to agree with everything you're arguing for, because debate is kind of like a game where different things are accepted in different formats, and when you learn the rules of each format, it's more fun to play overall. If you take it too seriously, you don't enjoy yourself, and when you don't enjoy yourself, you experience performance issues. There are also different adjing styles corresponding with each different format, as well as different speaker roles and positions that you have to fulfill, so make sure to try multiple positions and find something you like.
There are also many cultural differences that exist across debate. Debaters within different countries, for example, have their preferences in what they like to emphasize within their speeches, and this is also the same for debaters within the same country or even the same circuit, where they have different preferences in what they like to emphasize within their speeches and how they prefer to strategize within the debate. So be sure to experiment with different partners to open yourself up to new experiences that could potentially change the way you see things.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoy the round as much as we will.
Thank you, Anglo Singapore International School. Bogea Kunchan, do you want to know who's the second team joining us here today? Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Patumwan Demonstration School.
Good afternoon, parents, fellow debaters, adjudicators, and audiences. I am Tidet, but you can call me Pupa. I'm the president of PDS Debate Club and the first speaker of the PDS Silent Debate today. PDS Debate has been running for over 10 years. It has created not just a community of scholars, but a family of alumni and current members. Our club offers EPDS students a chance to improve their public speaking and critical thinking. It opens viewpoints to events around the world. As a result, I am truly proud to be debating today. And now, let's look at the 2 other members and how debate has transformed them.
Hi, my name is Sakawan, but you can call me Jonah.
I'm the second speaker representing PDS1. I'm in my senior year of high school, and about my debate career, Pupa or T-Date was the one who got me into debate in late grade 10, right? As I got the chance to speak for the first time, I started to fall in love with the competitive aspects of debate. Whenever I felt that my speech was subpar, I immediately reviewed my mistakes. After around 1 year of debating, I was selected to be a debater of the Thailand national team, and debate helped me in various aspects such as critical thinking and public speaking. And debating also helped me to see things from different angles.
Hi, I'm Patarakorn, but you can call me Purse. I am the third speaker or whip of PDS1. Unlike Jonan, I actually got into debate quite early. In fact, I got into debate in Matiyam 1. Ajanitis, who has been an advisor for PDS Debate Club for over 15 years, actually got me into debate. He did this by promising me a lot of snacks and a lot of pizza, which, if I'm being honest, pretty much worked. However, as I started to attend debate more, I didn't go for the food. Rather, I went for the seniors who took great care of me. They gave me a reference point of what type of debater I want to be, what goals I want to achieve, and they also taught me an idea of fostering the next generation of PDS debaters, which I intend on taking up on. It has allowed me to engage with other thinkers from all across the globe, from all paths and walks of life. I would like to thank you, debate, for all the bad times which made me stronger and all the good times which made life meaningful.
And that are the two finalists joining us here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to sit back, relax, and enjoy the debate grand final of the MFA Inter-School Debating Championship 2021. My colleague from Point Avenue, Thailand will be helping moderating the debate sessions. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy.
Okay. The motion of today's debate will be: this House believes that states should strive to reduce income inequality even after everyone has enough for an acceptable quality of life. The speeches are 8 minutes length. After 8:15, we are not taking any more notes. We will text you in the chat if you reach the time. Please time yourself, and good luck to all teams. We are ready to call the Prime Minister to open the round.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that increasing equality will lead to more opportunity for the country and leads to more success. Several definitions I would like to start in this debate. The first definition is on the acceptable quality of life. And when we talk about an acceptable quality of life, we talk about like fulfilling all 4 basic needs: food, water, medicine, and shelter. Basically, fulfill what is needed for you to have a healthy and a complete lifestyle where you don't really need to risk your life or risk your health. The next term I would like to define is on reducing income inequality. We talk about making the wealth gap of the general society become smaller and smaller. And the burden of proof that we need to prove in this debate is that firstly, which side would improve productivity? And secondly, which side would create a more stable society in the long run? And one clarification that we would like to make in this debate is that on the proposition side, we are not going to go the full socialist or the full communist route. The motion never really suggests that we completely eliminate inequality. Basically, what we are trying to go with is that even if everyone has an acceptable, normal, healthy living lifestyle, the inequality is too big that we still will need to reduce. That doesn't mean that we will completely make everyone equal in terms of monetary terms. And our stance, we believe that reducing inequality will create more opportunities for more people. And on the arguments, first argument is on how a higher equality leads to a more educated population base. We need to first recognize that even if all the main quality of life has been sustained, it doesn't mean that they necessarily have a good education. And even if every single one has a basic education, we will still think that we should strive for a highest level of education possible. And where would the education come from? Education come from one, you have access to, you have more monetary access to better schools, but you also have more money to pay for things like tuition and transportation and internet and computers and things like that. We should make basically general education, but also work training be improved. And we have several levels of benefits on why having a more educated population base in a higher degree of knowledge would be better for the overall country. On the first and the most intuitive level, we talk about the economical level. So basically, if the workers are better trained, then they become better at what they do. Also, they become more suitable, or they become more people become more qualified for higher level jobs. This would also be beneficial to businesses who would be seeking to improve, for example, their work output by having a more efficient worker base. Then the business will be improved overall, both in the lower positions, but also in, for example, a more managerial positions. On this, another benefit on the economical level would also be the fact that because of how education in the status quo in the present day isn't really spread wide to everyone yet in a good level, a lot of people in the rural areas and a lot of people in marginalized groups, for example, do not have the opportunity to reach this level of education, even if many of them may have the talent to be able to succeed in the future. We see that when, yes.
If the state is good enough so that it can guarantee basic needs for everybody, don't you think the states would have the capacity to guarantee education as well?
That is just an assumption. We need to recognize that the very first thing the state would be able to pay for is the basic needs, what you need. Healthcare and food and all. That doesn't necessarily mean that the state has enough money to further go on and do more advanced thing like improving countrywide education or Wi-Fi or giving everyone access to technology in general. So yes, our case still stands on that point. Moving back to the economical benefit, we see that if more people who may have talents are provided the benefits of education, there would be a wider pool for you to choose your talents from. You would also principally give people more chance to display their talents, and also how there would maybe a more competitive process where people need to try harder to get into their jobs because everyone is getting stronger now. So you need incentive to be even more competitive for a candidate pool, leading to a more productive worker base. On a second level, what I also talk about on a political basis, in a sense that if, for example, on a government agency doesn't really comprise of, for example, the president or the prime minister, but also comprise of multiple organizations that have workers on it. And we believe that if we have a more competent worker in each governmental offices, then we would create a better action by the government, but also in the fact that if people become more informed in, for example, who they vote from, getting from education, then it would be less likely for populist candidates who just rely on simple messages but no real solutions to be able to be successful if the voters know who they're voting for. So we believe that better education will also lead to a better political system and also a better political government or candidate. On the third level, we'd also talk about how there would be less crime. Why would there be less crime? Two explanations. Firstly, if the quality of life gets even better and if your life becomes even more easier, then you would also have less incentive, for example, to maybe commit crime to get even more things. But also on how if you become more educated and you know more about things like the legal system and you are able to see the world in a wider scale, then if, for example, people do wrong things, or for example, if business were to cheat on you or make unfair laws, and then it would be more likely for society to be able to call out these shenanigans, for example. And on the fourth and last final level, we also make social rights be more accessible and be more equal, in a sense that marginalized groups would be facing less racism, because you need to understand that things like racism come from the fact that people don't really are exposed to the groups that they do not really know about, and ignorance breeds fear, and therefore if, for example, you become more knowledgeable of the world and things like that, it makes you more understanding of, for example, people in wider groups, which leads you to being less fearful of people who you don't know about. Leads to, for example, things like less racism. Moving on to the second argument, we'd like to also talk about how it creates a more competitive economy.
And on this argument, we have two levels. On the first level, on how it creates more businesses, you need to recognize that aside from education, another factor that you need in order to be able to afford a business, that you need more money and you need more capital. And in our paradigm, if we strive to reduce income inequality, we believe that on that basis alone, people would have more money to start things like businesses. The problem with the status quo right now is that big businesses have very few competition. They don't have as much incentive to try as hard. Look at, for example, Comcast, who doesn't really have competitive in their region of the US where they are basically operating on. They don't really strive as hard, for example, to create a business model that would be better for customer services, but also create better products. We believe that businesses would be more incentivized to become better in terms of customer service if there are more competitions, because more people can start off businesses. But also it would, on a second level, people would have a more incentive to work. Why is that? So we need to recognize that currently there's a lot of glass ceiling for people with disenfranchised opportunities, because, for example, for many people who are not benefiting from the system, no matter how hard they try, they would not be able to succeed because of the system inequalities and things like that. We believe that by giving them the chance, for example, to succeed, they would be able to try harder, etc. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much to Prime Minister for that speech. And it's time for Leader of the Opposition to open the case for the opposition side.
Hello, so can I check if I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Note that the proposition's entire case basically hinges upon the fact that that education won't come with an acceptable quality of life. And we think that if we can take that down, we can take down a large chunk of their case. But before I move on to my rebuttals, I would like, and the arguments, a few points of setup, right? First of all, we think that when it comes to reducing income inequality, it can also look like making sure wages are more at similar levels, creating more jobs, and overall focus is on income and labor. Next, we think that we have to recharacterize what side proposition has been trying to make out to be in this debate, right? First of all, we think that in order for you to have education, we think that education actually precedes having an acceptable quality of life, which is also a rebuttal to their case as well. We don't think that to their POI as well, right? Because we don't think that in most countries, right, in order for you to be able to build the infrastructure that guarantees you food, water, and shelter, we think that oftentimes your population have to be educated first in order to learn about how to build infrastructure and how to coordinate your country in order to create this infrastructure necessary to create an acceptable quality of life. Next, we also think that because they also hinge their social rights points and the ability to create businesses on the point of education, we think that their social rights points and their businesses are also wrong, right? When it comes to social rights, we think that on our side of the house, we will also, the society with acceptable quality of life will already have a decent amount of social rights, in the sense of people will already be educated and people won't be as racist, sexist, or as homophobic as they would like to paint it to be. Furthermore, people will also generally have higher incomes, which means that they don't have to rely on selling their labor to survive with their abusive employer. And what this implies is that this means that there aren't as many extreme urgent problems that the state needs to address, right? So what happens is we think that the state should rather focus on the best way to achieve growth. Next, what is our stance in today's debate? Our stance in today's debate is very clear. We think that we would promote growth and production by increasing accessibility to capital ownership. What would this look like under our side of the house? We think that it would look like, the state making sure that owning capital is much easier and cheaper, reducing bureaucracy and making business ownership extremely easy, so that people can go into businesses and increase the opportunity and increase growth and productivity as well. A few more points of rebuttals, right? First of all, as I've mentioned in my setup, we don't think that education can come after having an acceptable quality of life. We think that it comes before. And even if that's not the case, right, we still think that businesses won't necessarily not come out if people don't have education, right? We still think that if people have even a little bit of money, people can start businesses and run businesses. And the difference between the two cases is that on their side of the house, they want to focus on the result and equality of income, whereas on our side of the house, we want to focus on creating an ability for people to start easily and have accountability. So with that done, I'm going to move on to my argument, which is about how we can increase productivity on our side of the house. But before I move on, any POIs? Okay, so if there's going to be no POIs, I'm going to head into my argument. My argument is about productivity and a few layers of analysis. But firstly, why do we think that this is done after, right? Note that as a clarification, outside the house does not think that in the status quo, we should not be pushing for income inequality. However, we think that after there is an acceptable quality of life, usually because there is already education, there is already a reasonable amount of income, there is more jobs, and there is more income and labor. We think that the unacceptable quality of life that causes people to die and suffer from poverty at the expense of private owners and millionaires would disappear, right? For example, in the status quo, unjust systems such as systemic racism, such keeping certain groups out of high-paying jobs, or the rich charging extremely high rent to keep their tenants trapped in the cycle of poverty would disappear under our paradigm. And when it disappears, we think that when it disappears, then people are no longer oppressed by the system of competition that traps people in certain very oppressive systems that I have mentioned, right? Now that there is an acceptable quality of life, that tenant that has been working in
point of information.
No, thank you. That tenant that has been trapped in the cycle of poverty can finally move out and try to gain capital in order to move out of that oppressive system. And so the next point is, how is economic growth created? We think that economic growth is usually created to increase production, to better competition. And so how do we have higher levels of production on our side of the house? We think that firstly, because we have a more capital-based form of competition, which is basically when you rely less on people and labor and more on the capital that you have. For example, in the past, on side proposition, you may have people using their labor to work for a business owner. But on our side of the house, we would have more capital working for people. For example, we use machines instead to produce things for other people. And so we think that there will be more development within firms, more high quality, efficient products within the market that everyone can access. Next is that better competition also leads to increased productivity because everyone continues to earn profit and they can increase their quality of products and gain more access to and that is because when they gain more access to capital, when they gain more access to capital, they're more able to create new products and keep innovating to increase productivity. And so comparatively, we think that making sure people have higher incomes doesn't necessarily guarantee that they'll be able to compete, and doesn't mean that they'll be able to own their own capital and ensure stability. And before I move on to why this is very important, I would be willing to take a PY if you still have any.
What is your alternative solution aside from just letting inequality run rampant?
We never said that we are going to let inequality run rampant, right? We think that that is an assertion and a mischaracterization of our case. As I've already stated in our recharacterization, we think that by the time that the society has an acceptable quality of life, we think that not only is inequality much smaller, but people are able to walk away from oppressive systems that make inequality extremely bad in the first place. And this also leads me to my next point on why this is extremely important. We think that firstly, our stance is justified because now we can create growth without taking less fortunate people's quality of life away. And secondly, we think that there is no need to take money away from people who have earned money fair and square when there is no injustice, because in this case, people who are most talented will be earning more money. Finally, we think that better productivity leads to better life for everyone and increases the likelihood that people would be able to continue leading the same lifestyle, if not improving even further, because now people that used to work in labor, that used to work a 9-to-5 job, no longer have to work for that, and they will have their ability to run away from this oppressive, unfair system that will allow them to escape from their poverty and live their life as they should be. And so for all these reasons, I am very proud to oppose.
Thank you very much. And it's time for the second proposition speaker now.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Wait, not sure. I prefer verbal POIs. And that's oh wait, my timer here. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In 2008, the United States, along with the entire world, went into an economic crisis just because one banking company made a few bad financial decisions. We believe that unreliable and unsustainable economy is a huge problem all over the world, and our side believes that we should solve it. The thing I'll be bringing into this debate is how our side makes the economy more reliable and sustainable by tackling on 2 levels. The first level being on these countries having monopolies, and the second level on the harms of class disparity. But before that, a few rebuttals. So first, their entire case, right? Their side opposition assumes that the state cannot afford basic needs, right? Cannot afford it, that if they can afford basic rights, they can afford education for people and higher education. Now, the thing is that education is very expensive, no matter where you are and where you need schooling, but also education, the infrastructure, traveling, internet and resources, etc. Those things, when they come up together, it's very expensive, right? Now, that's very different from the supporting people with the 4 basic needs, right? Just because a community can afford to live with the 4 basic needs, it does not mean that they can afford high quality bachelor's degree education. So first, I would like to point out the USA, right? Side opposition clearly does just dismiss the existence of the United States. A 4-year college puts a student in $200,000 in debt, right? In student loan debts. Sure, the state supports and helps the students to pay, but it's nowhere near enough. It's nowhere near the actual cost that they have to pay. Now, the second point, their side talks about the things like machines to move on. No, thank you. Machines to replace you, right? Now, machines are not exclusive to their side. And also, you cannot change executive roles or even middle-level management positions in a firm to a robot, right? You can't just let them do those decisions instead of a person, right? In our paradigm, we support higher education and people getting high-paying jobs as well. Right now, there are structural reasons on why the 90% will never get their talents recognized because of how money difference is far too wide to invest in anything, right? Which can be reduced with our side's greater income equality. Now, moving on to my arguments, how our side makes the economy more reliable and sustainable. On the first level, on having monopolies, right? A lot of the countries which has an acceptable quality of life and still has high income inequality are most likely going to be countries that just got out of poverty recently, but some are still quite out of poverty for quite a while, like the United States, right? We're talking about countries with high income inequalities here. So this looks like countries with, this implies that those countries have people with extremely high incomes, like monopolies, and companies with way too much power. So what's the problem with this? The problem with this is that countries with monopolies, right, they have the majority of their wealth and the power hoarded by a few people or a single entity or company, right? And when these companies or these monopolies fail, the entire economic system of the countries with huge inequalities fail as well, right? For example, back in 2008, I've stated this in my introduction, but I'll dive deeper here. There was a global economic crisis, which was started mainly from Lehman Brothers' failure, right? Lehman Brothers was a highly successful banking company which hoarded way too much money. But not only that, they also hoarded tons of employees, real estate properties, also all over United States, like houses, buildings, and apartment, right? So when they made a few bad decisions, like they did back in 2008, in a second, all of their employees go unemployed. All of their money that they're hoarding are gone. The entire economy in the United States failed along with the rest of the world. Now, moreover, in a monopolistic economy, right, there's little to no competition for these people. Then that means that there's less incentive for companies like this to innovate or develop their products or to make their products better or cheaper for the collective, right? Since people will buy their stuff anyway. This is all due to the fact that these countries rely way too much on a single entity or a few entity. And before I move on, I'll accept a POI.
If the problem is that some monopoly company is destroying the economy, then wouldn't be in our incentive to support side opposition's policy to make sure that everyone can run the business and split out the wealth even more among all the businesses?
Now, here's the thing. What you just described was exactly our side, right? Our case is to reduce inequality so that people get the opportunities to build their own business, to get good education, to climb up the social ladder for that, so that everyone, not just one or two people, can run that much such a business, right? So that people, so that not only one entity can own such a company, but any person or or a lot of people in the country have the opportunity to, or have enough money to, or have enough capital to. And that's a result of our case. That's a result in our paradigm, not yours. Now, on the outside of the house, we are solving the problem about monopoly, because when there's more equality, the country will not have to rely on a single entity for economic progress, right? Meaning that a single entity won't cause the whole country's economy to collapse, or the whole world's economy to collapse, or go into an economic crisis, leading to a more sustainable and reliable economy on other outside of the house. Now, moving on to the second level to this argument, right, on the harms of class disparity. Class division and class disparity is inevitable in countries with high income inequality, right? So what are the harms of class disparity? So there's four main harms that I'm going to bring up today. First is how huge class disparity leads to more political instability, because people in low income bracket feels unfairly placed there, right? There's not enough social service, and they cannot gain good enough education, right? Well, there are people who are financially stable and believe these people are just lazy and that they're paying for these poorer people, right? This tension exists on their side too, right? And their side has no way in fixing that, but our side fixes that, and I'll explain why in a moment. Now, second harm of class disparity. So many people in these countries, right, countries with high income equality, they want others to think that they're these people want others to think that they're a high status person or in a higher social class, even when they aren't. They do this by buying luxury goods and expensive things pointlessly. They're willing to drown in credit card debt just so people perceive them as having higher social status, and this is highly unsustainable to them. The third problem with the class disparity is discrimination. People in higher social classes discriminates people in lower social classes. And the fourth problem is the cycle of poverty, right? We see that is a huge problem that comes with income inequality and class disparity, because when people can't get proper education, they are most likely not going to be able to get the chance to get a proper job, right? Our side solves all of these problems and reduce class disparity by reducing income inequality, right? Something which side opposition has no way to tackle. And for all of these reasons, I've never been prouder to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and it's time for Diallo to respond. DLL.
Hi, am I clearly visible and audible?
Yes, now you are.
All right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Inequality and income inequality in the status quo isn't exactly caused just by the end result of people not having enough income. It isn't created by business owners being like monopolistic, but it's created by people unable to become business owners in the first place, right? Because if you actually look at like if you actually look at the analysis that they've been trying to bring up to us about how you know like there are monopolies and people hoard, which means that that you hinge your economy on this, that what that necessarily that's a problem solution mismatch, right? That the problem there isn't necessarily that people don't have the same or have similar levels of income, but rather it's that people cannot get access to capital, is that people cannot become business owners and therefore cannot compete, right? And that's where the distinction between our two cases lies, because on their side, the focus is on the end result, right? The focus is on income because the wording of the motion specifically says strive to reduce income inequality. So when the focus is on income, then that means that and then comparatively, when we have our side, when the focus is on the starting point, right, the focus is on being able to access capital, being able to become a business owner in the first place. And what that necessarily means is that they have a problem solution mismatch, right? So let's actually look a little bit at the characterization of what an acceptable quality of life actually looks like, right? Because it isn't just like something that like occurs like once and then like and then like it all of a sudden backslides, right? Because an acceptable quality of life does to an extent necessitate like some form of stability. It means that you have to actually be able to like keep that acceptable quality of life, right? It means that you actually have to be able to have education. Like if you're in crippling debt just because you went to college, I don't think anyone would consider that acceptable, right? Which is why like their points about America having like acceptable quality, like having an acceptable quality of life is just completely untrue, right? Because when people are in debt from healthcare or from education, or when there's still like blatant like racism or like violence, then that's very clearly not like, you know, acceptable, right? If you're facing racial inequality, if you're facing discrimination, like like if you say that that's acceptable, we just like don't know how to respond to that, right? Like living in a racist or like a sexist society clearly isn't acceptable. So what that necessarily means for their case is because they've hinged a lot of their harms on that, and like a lot of their harms on that, then those harms necessarily fall, and they have to come up and make the distinction specifically as to why income inequality itself is the main factor in like creating this inequality, because accessibility necessitates some form of stability, meaning that the government would have funds on our side. Next thing then on their point about hoarding and monopolies, right? That like, first of all, we've already identified that this is a problem solution mismatch, and I'll be talking about that more, in my argument, right? But note that again, because they've made this like such a big point of their case, that like if we manage to prove that we also solve that problem, then that harm doesn't stand, and they basically have no harms of our case left to stand on. And considering they haven't really provided any mutually exclusive mechanization as to why the focus specifically on the end result of income inequality is like something that is so desirable and so mutually exclusive only to their side, that they have nothing left in their case to stand on, right? But next, let's talk about like the harms of class disparity that they talk about, right? That like, first of all, like even if there are, you know, like harms of class disparity, then the question then becomes who better solves class disparity better, right? Because class difference is about ownership of capital, right? If you're a capital owner, then that means you're in the upper class. If you're a worker, that means you're in the lower class, right? It isn't necessarily about income. So what that means is that you can have a high income, still be a worker, and therefore still be in the working class, right? And so when it actually comes to that, by us solving like this problem of capital accessibility, then that means that we actually solve class disparity much better on our side, and I'll also be explaining that further in my argument, right? And so when it actually comes down to like what the comparative between the two cases is, that we would rather focus much more on increasing accessibility, on people being more able to focus on being able to become business owners, on like being able to gain the skills to become business owners, rather than just increasing the wages of people. Before I move into my arguments, are there any POIs? Right, okay, then into my argument. firstly, how their side basically just makes it a lot worse, right? The first reason for this is that like the redistribution of wealth that they want and like increasingly higher taxes actually decreases the incentive to work, right? This is because if people know that they have to pay more taxes if they get into like a higher income bracket, then at the end of the day, the amount of money that they have might be like, you know, a very similar level to what they already have, or even like a lower level. And so this means that they might not consider it worth it. So they're less incentivized to work harder, and that just basically means a decrease in efficiency overall. It means less competition, it means lower quality products, and that just means like lower standards of living for the entire country, right? So already like this striving to reduce income inequality actually just is more likely to like to make the country like not actually have acceptable like standards of living, right? And we think that when it comes to weighing it off, that we would much rather have acceptable standards of living and income inequality as opposed to like having, you know, like no income inequality, but people still not having like good standards of living, people not being able to afford the basic necessities, because the basic necessities like definitely come before like, you know, like equal wages, because, you know, like living to people is more important than being equal, because you can't be equal if you're not like alive. But yeah, and then into the second level then on why it's actually much easier to become a business owner on our side, because note that the problem that we've identified is more isn't specifically about income. And while like, you know, maybe an increased income on their side might make them more able to own capital, that money isn't the only important thing they need, right? Because they're going to need skills to be able to like manage workers or to create business plans or to make like more efficient economic decisions. There's also like a lot of bureaucracy and red tape that our side wants to get rid of, right? So what this means is that like, for example, on their side, if somebody hires you to make a product, then like on their side, what they would do is they would make that wage, they would make those wages higher, right? So this might mean that it's easier for you to buy machinery, but it doesn't mean you can run it or operate it or make profit from it, right? On our side, what that means is that we make it so that these people are more capable of like owning machinery and of being able to operate it. So even if they don't have as high wages, because on our side, we make that machinery more cheap, that they can still start their own businesses, right? And eventually earn more income than what they have on our side. And like, this is especially true because like being a business owner brings you a lot more profit than being a worker, right? Because like the money that you get from making profit is a lot higher than the money you get from your wages, because of the amount of value that's added on when you create a product, as opposed to just the labor that's put into creating a product, right? And so what this necessarily means is that like we see that in the status quo, that exploitation that they're talking about only wouldn't actually exist in our scenario, right? Because exploitation means that like exploitation happens because there are no alternatives, right? Because these workers don't have the option to like leave the business and start their own business, or you know, like go to a business that has like higher wages, and that skews power dynamics, right? But what happens when we actually have increased access to capital is that they're no longer reliant on these businesses to like pay them to like be able to exist, right? Meaning that either they can become business owners if the wages that companies offer them aren't enough, and so that means that the competition will now be between firms, right, to offer them good wages in order for them to actually join the company, because they don't have that leverage over them anymore, because these people are able to leave the company and be able to start their own business, right? In the long term, it also means that like when you have this higher focus on being able to own capital, on having higher standards of competition as opposed to the end result, then that means people are going to focus a lot more on that means that on their side when they put so much focus on labor and on income, then that means they solidify like the necessity for it, right? It means that they create jobs that might not be needed because it would, you know, like give people higher income, even though like a piece of capital could be able to do that job better. The reason that this is much better on our side is that when we have like this focus on efficiency itself and on the process rather than on the end result of income, that like it means that they're going to be more focused on actually being able to create a more efficient capital, meaning that they're going to be able to just overall have a better economy in the long term.
Thank you very much for that speech. It's time for a government whip.
Okay, so if you want to POI me, you can speak it out verbally, and I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The biggest mistake on side opposition is when they ran a parallel case and didn't try to engage on our side if we had education, right? The biggest mistake on side opposition is that the whole crux of their their arguments and their benefits and the harms they propose on us is that they have education. Well, in my classes, in today's debate, are we proving to you why education is much more likely on our side, and even if on their side they have education, it's still worse off on their side? Some clarifications that have to be made. Up argued with us on the USA up until DPM's speech. Then DOO came up and said that the USA's quality of life isn't good, so it doesn't count in the debate. Side opposition's case is way too flippy-floppy, and they cannot do this. Moving on to some key rebuttals. Their side talks about how our case is only about education. It is not only about education. We have already talked on how income inequality makes more people being able to have money to do business or not leaving too much money of an economy hanging out to a few people, right? We give much more access to people to give them much more chance on our side. There's my second rebuttal. Their side say that because our side are relying on income inequality, people cannot be business owners or own capital unlike their side. You need income in your life. First, to get money to start a business. Otherwise, where can you conjure money to start the business, right? And let's ask them, if income inequality is not the problem, then what actually is? And their side keeps saying that the problem is not with the income, that people are having bad quality of life, and then gives us so many levels of analysis that they need education, they need professional level training. But notice that after all of that, their case circles back to lower class people needing more income, which is what our side is doing. So essentially, their side is debating in favor of our case. Thank you so much. They keep saying that monopolies aren't the problem. We have already given you tangible harms that come from monopolistic economies, such as countries relying too much on these monopolies. And when those monopolies fail, the economy of these countries fail. So the state has too much of a high risk placed on these companies. If the wealth is properly distributed, and there would be not much income disparity, the problem is solved in our case, right? Next, moving on to my third rebuttal. How does their side create access to capital without raising people's income? Not everyone is going to become a business owner, still, because of how there are many jobs like doctors, lawyers, public service, and teachers. So you cannot just force everyone to own a business, right? Not everyone is a business mogul or a entrepreneur. Automated systems cannot replace doctors or lawyers or teachers, and their side would not work in many industries, which causes even higher risk on their side again, because the economy is relying too much in a certain sector, right? And just because you get capital, but you don't have a reliable income to go to, as a citizen, you need to depend on your life, whether your business takes off, right? Inevitably, some business will fail naturally in a capitalist society, and some people will need good income jobs to turn back to, which is something their side does not have, causing people to be stuck in that poverty cycle even worse, because realize that not everyone is fit to be an entrepreneur, and not every business, even if it has a good idea, succeeds, right? Okay, now I'll be moving on to some of the clashes in today's debate. Today, I will provide you with two clashes. Which side allows for the best economic productivity for states, and my second clash will be on which side improves the lives of citizens, right? First clash. What did we tell you on economic productivity, right? First speaker and second speaker provided you with so many structural levels of analysis on why we produce a much more competitive worker base, more chance for people to display talents, and a higher incentive to work harder, and much more higher skills and resources to start a company. So there's a higher competition between businesses, and there's also higher competition between the worker base and the worker pool that these companies choose from, right? Then let's talk about how, and then we also went into how we make the economy much more reliable and sustainable, since the majority of wealth is not hoarded by some single entity, right? We spread the risk where there's a lot more companies that can be successful, and then they compete, causing a much more economically productive and economically competitive society, right? How did they respond, right? They suddenly just said that education has to come before improving and before having an acceptable quality of life, right? Let me ask you a question. If people can survive, i.e. not having the 4 basic needs, would states really ignore and let them die to improve education? That is not true, right? For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the education budget of
almost every country is literally reduced to improve and get more vaccination for people, right? So as a result, we told you that education will come later when acceptable quality of life happen, which is what we're focusing on. This shows you that education cannot exist on their side if people don't have acceptable quality of life, right? And then they talk about how we focus too much on income and they focus on the capital and make people become business owners, right? Realize how wishy-washy that sounds, right? They just suddenly come up with the government's giving out capital to people. Firstly, distributing capital is not that simple, right? There's so many types of capital, so many types of businesses. So how does thank you. So how does a government would be able to distribute this type of capital to everyone and suddenly say that everyone will become business owners and they will all be successful, right? Their case and their benefits is quite wishy-washy, right? Then let's talk about what did they present on this clash, right? They talk about how business ownership is going to become much easier because there's going to be much more education on their side, which is not true, as we have shown you. And they also say that there's going to be capital handed out to people, right? Look, and then they talk about how there's going to be machine incorporation. Yeah, before I move on.
We never said that we're going to hand out capital to people. What we've said is that the government is going to make it easier to have capital by not passing policies that are meant to reduce income inequality. Please respond to that point.
So basically, they're going to ignore education and have capital be much more accessible. So on their side, as I've shown you, that education wouldn't exist. It would be much less likely that education exists on their side. How would suddenly people be able to use that capital, even if the governments are able to make it much more accessible to people, right? Since people have no education, and even if they get that and they know how to use it, as I've told you, if the business they're making fails, which is not just because businesses are not just a correlation of how much education or how much skill you have, right? There's also a factor of luck and timing, right? So if these businesses fail, what safety measures do you have for these people? What can these people lie back on? This leads me to my second question, right? On which side improves the lives of citizens. Our side have already shown you that it's going to be much more. Our society is going to be much more equitable for people, right? Since people have much more accessibility to social services, and people are going to have a much more better jobs that can give them education and give them the basic needs of their life. They're going to be much more happy because they feel as if society is much more equal, eliminating the tensions between lower income class and higher income class, right? As a result, as I've told you, their case is literally copying our case, and we have told you the distinctions on why education is exclusive on our side, and this is why we take today's debate. Supremely proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. Opposition Whip.
Hi, can I check if I'm audible with my mask on and also visible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Just give me a second. Okay. All right, just to reiterate, he, they pronouns and verbal POIs. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, government doesn't stand, the fact that government doesn't stand for communist absolute equality means that they need to be specific as to what problems they want to solve and to what extent they want to hold by this principle of equality, right? They need to specify specific problems, and if we can prove that we solve those problems as well on our side of the house, then their entire case falls apart, right? Because if they don't support the principle of equality for its own sake, then they need to come up with problems that they want to solve. If we can solve those problems, we win the debate because we're not unjustifiably redistributing money from people when we don't necessarily need to, because there are no problems to solve on our side of the house. So first then, on access to business, right? They talked about how because of monopolies, it's bad because when those monopolies fail, then everyone suffers. But note that this assumes that there are less people going into business on our side of the house, which we've made consistently clear that it's just simply not true, right? Because first of all, that under their side of the house, by striving for economic equality, what this means is that government necessarily has to punish people at the top, right? This because you want to redistribute wealth, right? And usually people at the top are usually the people who are the most productive or creates the most productivity and goods within society, right? First of all, what this leads to is, first of all, less efficiency, right? My second speaker already told you about this. Also note that they never care to justify why this is true, right? Because note that in the status quo, and I think my first speaker made this pretty clear, that the reason why we strive for income equality is not to make people equal, right? It's to give people a basic living standard, and we accept that government has that the state has an obligation to make people have a basic living standard, right? And that's how they justify redistributing wealth and taking rich people's wealth and giving it to poor people. In this new paradigm that we're debating in, this doesn't happen anymore, right? Because no one is oppressed anymore, because everyone has a basic living standard, right? Everyone can have access to clean air, to clean water, clean food, have access to housing, right? Things like that. What happens then is that they don't have under government, the state no longer has a reason or a principle as to why this redistribution is justified in the first place, right? Because if they want to talk about, because the only justifications possible are like these problems of like access to business and education. And if we can take those down, then we win this debate, right? Second thing that they talked about, right, is that we don't give people capital, or even if we do give the people means, or even if we do give people capital, then people lack the means to use it because we don't support education. First of all, note that this is obviously a straw man of how things are in the real world, right? Obviously, some forms of productivity needs education, some forms of production doesn't, right? We think that they're like, you don't necessarily need to have like the academic the academic background of like having a Bachelor of Science to be able to run like a company, right? That's just absurd. But in the instance where you do need this kind of education or this kind of knowledge, then we can also stand for that, right? Because the motion doesn't necessarily necessitate that we can't stand for educational equality, right? This point is so far detached from the original motion that we think that to the extent that they only want to support that kind of equality, then we think that they lose this debate because it's a wash, and that wasn't within the frame of the motion. Also note that secondly, that under their side of the house, because they want more, because they necessarily want to push people into academic backgrounds, note that they also necessarily push more people into laboring for business owners, right? Because we need to understand the reason why people even go into education in the first place within the status quo, right? You go to university, you go to high school because you want to be able to get employed by other people, right? Because you don't have the means to own your own business, right? If you do, then why even go into education in the first place, right? Because why would you want to give yourself all those burdens of having to be able to graduate and things like that, right? To that extent, then the reason why people go into education in the first place is because they want to get employed and they want to be able to live an acceptable quality of life, right? To that extent, and in this new world, then we think that under that paradigm, people wouldn't necessarily need to go into education in the first place, since they can become business owners and don't necessarily need the academic background to be able to pass interviews and things like that, right? That's just a problem.
Point of information.
Under their side of the house, right? We don't necessarily need that. And we think that by encouraging people to go into education in the first place, that encourages people to become laborers for other people, because the academic background is a huge part of being able to pass job interviews and a huge incentive for people to just work for other people. And we think that leads to all the problems that they wanted to solve in the first place, right? Before moving on, I'll take a POI.
Do you think a society can survive only of everyone being businesses owners?
We don't necessarily have to stand for everyone being business owners, right? We never said that. But to the extent where there are more business owners, we think that that's perfectly manageable, so long as there are some people right, there will still be some people laboring on our side of the house, right? Because obviously not everyone wants to become a business owner in the first place. And to that extent, we benefit those people who don't want to become business owners, right? Because when there's less supply for for labor and for human capital. To that extent, then wages increases because companies will still want to hire some people, just less amount of people on our side of the house. Then the wages increases for those people who don't want to become business owners, right? We think that to that extent, there's a net positive for both people who want to become business owners and for people who don't want to become business owners. And we give people that choice. We think that that's better for everyone. But the bottom line, right? Note that even if you believe that our case is parallel to theirs, note that we still win this debate, right? Because their paradigm of redistribution necessarily necessitates a principle to justify that redistribution, right? And I've talked about this before, but I'll go into more depth right now, right? We think that we still win because under their side of the house, what happens when you redistribute money from people when you don't need that redistribution in the first place? We think that accounts to that basically equates to stealing, right? Because you're taking other people's money away unjustifiably. In the status quo right now, when you pursue income, when you pursue income equality and redistribute wealth, you have the justification to do so because not everyone has an acceptable living standard, right? And we benefit those people who don't have that acceptable living standard. Under their side of the house, it's just stealing because there's no reason for you to even redistribute wealth in the first place, since everyone can have a comfortable lifestyle. No one is being oppressed. No one has their right to life taken away. No one has a right. No one is having their right to a good quality of life and being able to live taken away. We think that to that extent, the government obligation to redistribute wealth no longer exists. This justification no longer exists. To that extent, they lose this debate because they're unjustifiably redistributing wealth and stealing other people's money. Second clash then on education, right? And note that this debate is not about education, right? It's about the ownership of capital, right? Because what happens, because on their side of the house, the problems that they identify are all not because of education, right? There's problems like monopolies collapsing and then everyone suffering is not because of education. What that means is that you don't but also note that you don't necessarily need education to be able to own capital and to be productive within society, right? That's just absurd. You need education in order to have the academic background to get hired by companies. I made that pretty clear. Two things then. First of all, right? Government runs into a logical dead end, right? Because they assume that without education, then there's then there's an unacceptable quality of life, and that's bad, right? But note that. And then they say that this is bad because there's no opportunity, but this is not true, right? Because to the extent that education does lead to no education does lead to unacceptable quality of life, then we think that there would be education on our side, right? Because then if there's no education, then people wouldn't be having an acceptable quality of life, right? That's specified by the motion. They're not debating a motion. Also, secondly, right? Note that but also note that making education more accessible doesn't necessarily mean that you end income inequality, right? Because to the extent that people still don't have the choice to become business owners, we think that we think that people are still going to be oppressed by monopolies and the failures that they themselves identify very proud to oppose.
Very much, and it's time for the reply speeches, starting with the opposition reply.
Hi, am I clearly audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The first strategic mistake that their side made was that they refused to address what the actual motion says, right? About striving. Like specifically the word striving means that when it comes to the policies that are going to be passed, even though the policies might like overlap, even though the policies might be the same, the intent of the policies or like the outcomes are going to be different, right? Because we've talked about how on their side, when they focus on like increasing the income of people with low income, then sure, there can be overlapping policies with increasing access to capital, but it's more about the intent itself, right? It's more about the action itself. And when it like, especially because they've like failed to even even mechanize why specifically like these policies to actually increase the income for these people necessarily will work, and because they haven't responded to my analysis about how their side just makes it worse when you have a lot more when you have people who still aren't able to access capital and who still fall into that same problem of not enough people being able to become business owners when they want to, that all they do is make it more likely that they're going to backslide into a non-acceptable lifestyle, right? But when it comes to the idea of whether or not they're going to strive to it, the second strategic mistake that they made was failing to even justify this in the first place, right? Because as we've talked about, when it comes to the redistribution of wealth, that in the status quo, the reason that people consider it justified, as we've talked about, is because people are on unequal playing grounds, right? And we've set this up since first speaker as well, that insofar as people do have equal playing grounds, as long as they do have these acceptable standards of living, as long as they don't have to incur costs that other people wouldn't necessarily have to, because they fail to prove that, then that isn't really redistribution in the status quo would be completely different from in that other scenario. And that's why, because they have still failed to prove that their case doesn't stand. Thirdly, their strategic mistake that they made was that they based their case off this characterization that isn't necessarily true, right? That when they try and solve these problems of education or social rights, already if people aren't able to access education that they want, or if they face discrimination, then that already falls out of the definition of a comfortable lifestyle, of an acceptable lifestyle. And then they also try and talk about these things that don't actually apply to our case, their analysis on monopolies, which is something that we've already taken down, because we've shown that when you have increased access to capital, then that necessarily is better than just having higher income, because more business owners means more competition as opposed to just people with higher income, right? We've talked about how if you have higher income, then that doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to even compete with business owners if you're being employed by them, right? Competition exists between business owners, not between business owners and employees. And so that necessarily means that when it comes to competition and when it comes to economic growth, that you necessarily need to have more business owners, which we have on our side, right? And then they also try and strawman us on how an economy can't be 100% capital, which again is something that we've already addressed in terms of how if you have more on how there will be more capital on more business owners because there's more access to capital, as well as how wages will also be better on our side, right? And the reason for this is that we've already talked about this, that the competition will then exist between the firms instead, because they no longer have that leverage over the workers to be able to hold their wages over their heads when the workers are able to just start their own business if they feel that the company isn't treating them right? And so what this necessarily means is that because so many of the problems that they've identified, first of all, don't even exist, secondly, don't apply to our case, that what the only thing that they're really left with is this idea of growth or stability, which again we've already engaged with them on that by showing that we have it much better on our side when instead of redistribution, when instead of not incentivizing people to work as hard because that means that when you don't incentivize people to work as hard because they know that their money is just going to be taken away, or when you have people who are more able to compete or to create better products or to actually have the incentive to innovate, that at the end of the day we create more growth, we create more stability as well.
Thank you very much, and it's time for the final speech of this debate, proposition reply.
Beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. Their size entire model is just based off giving people capitals and hope that they become successful business people. We have already rebutted that is completely absurd. Their side said that they're just gonna give people capital but not increase people income. That means that on their side, people who work in paid income jobs will still not be successful and still be stuck at super low paying jobs, while their side just push people to become business owners and things like that. We have already rebutted on many ways on our bench why having everyone become business owners does not work. We already talked about how society have so many jobs like doctors, lawyers, social workers, service people, firefighters, teachers, who exist who are not business owners but are necessary job for our society. We believe that these people still need a lot of pay for their family to achieve higher education, but to also open their opportunities in life. We believe what their side is, what their other side's paradigm looks like is a paradigm that everything becomes a store and there's no social services, there's no other outside jobs, and we see a society doesn't really work that way. We cannot turn our entire country, for example, into a grocery store or 7-Eleven. We believe that all these jobs are super important. On another level that we have already rebutted is that their side completely relies on people becoming business owners, and we see that our side, people can also become business owner, but people also have the safety net of having to be able to come back and get a good paid income job in case their business does not work. Because not all business work in society, sometimes demand and supply, demand is not enough, and not everyone can be business owner because they don't want to sometimes, but also because sometimes not all businesses can pan out even in the status quo. We believe that on our side of the paradigm, people can still get to have business, but people and also still get to have things like safety net and a high paying job that they can go back to, not a very low paying job that they will struggle their life in case their business venture do not come across as being successful. I have already POI'd their side on all of these problems, and what the opposition web response was just to basically bring up a new argument, a new analysis completely on how their side said that, okay, there's going to be less competition for people who want to apply for actual income paying jobs. But okay, one, that is a completely new point coming from the opposition web. But on a second level, it doesn't really make sense that even if, for example, more people become business owners, that Apple will just instantly run out of people to hire, for example. There will always be enough labor force for you to not just simply need to increase your wage or things like that. So we believe that it's not necessarily convincing for their side to just say that, okay, because the demand, because of the supply of workers go down, therefore necessarily the prices for these workers to go up instantly. We believe there are still too many people in society for that to actually be remotely possible, in a sense that not many people, for example, will ultimately want to become a long-term businessman, and also how there's just so many people in the earth. Apologies for how this come a bit too late, but that is a response coming from the opposition web, so there's really no choice on our side. The next thing, and a very big mistake their side have also committed, is that their side just assumes that our side only talks about education. That is ignoring like our first speaker's second argument, but also more importantly, the entirety of our second speaker's speech. Our second speaker talks about how when you balance income inequality, you make companies pay more and more, then necessarily the share of the money that big businesses have, for example, will reduce, which reduce their control over the entire economy, while having the working class, the middle people having more income and having more money, and necessarily also balance the power that they have over society. We believe that our second speaker have come up with a mechanism that if, for example, a big businesses have less money, then they have less control over society. Then if they mess up, they didn't drag the whole society down with it. So with all this in mind, we believe that our society is more balanced, but also have more opportunities and more jobs, and not rely on everyone becoming business people. Proud to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and to all of these speakers for excellent final. I will now gonna deliberate, and the results will be announced as per schedule very soon during the closing ceremony. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the debate.
Thank you, strangers.
Thanks for the debate.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the debate. That was really fun. I got to watch the participants debate throughout this tournament. That was definitely one of the high quality debates. What's going to happen now is for the next 10 minutes, we would have the CEO of Point Avenue, Danny, offer an address to the participants. And then we have Director General Tani, who would also offer an address. After that, we will be proceeding to the award ceremony. And finally, we're going to announce the result of the grand final. Thank you, everyone. So Danny, whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you very much, Coach Shatab. I was just quietly listening in. Thank you, everyone. I'm really honored and excited to be here to provide the closing remarks on behalf of Coach Shatab and Point Avenue. My name is Danny. I'm the founder and CEO of Point Avenue. I have been in education for about 12 years, specifically in Asia. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly proud of each and every one of you for pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. And also grateful to all of the coaches, adjudicators, volunteers, the passionate debate enthusiasts, or as Coach Shatab always reminds me, athletes, for caring to make a difference. This was our first and definitely won't be our last inter-school competition. we hope to partner with Ministry of Foreign Affairs Thai community and the global debating community to host this as well as other debating competitions and bring these opportunities for our deserving students here in Thailand. I just want to share with you the history of how this all began. So we were very fortunate, Point Avenue, to have met Director General at the time, former ambassador. He was the ambassador to Vietnam, and even before that, the Consul General to Los Angeles, USA. And so in Vietnam, we had met him, and we just began the conversations to say, what can we do to make more of a difference as educators? And once he took on the important responsibility to be the spokesman of Thailand's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on November 4th, 2020, he invited us to do a radio talk show at the MFA that he was hosting. And on that event, we had a separate conversation about partnering together with MFA and Point Avenue to launch the first inter-school debate competition. And so then we fast forward a few months. Now we're talking January 12th, 2021. Coach Shatab spearheaded this effort. I give him so much credit and applause for his leadership. And we put together an initial proposal to submit to MFA. And then you fast forward a few months. We were planning to host this in the springtime. Due to COVID, right, we decided to pivot the dates, and now we're here, and just incredibly proud of all the people who made this happen. And I want to revisit the vision. The vision and the purpose of all of this was for MFA and Point Avenue together to support Thailand's vision by learning to listen, creating an international community, exchanging knowledge and ideas, and creating a culture of excellence. Together, we aim to train a generation of orators, effective communicators, and most importantly, citizens, and make a difference, one voice, one step, one initiative at a time. Now I want to share with you what you accomplished. Every single person on this call, every single person who was a part of this very special event. And in the spirit of our debate competition, I will speak in the debate speak, which is rapid fire. I'm so impressed by how fast information you can all process and how fast you can do it so eloquently and articulately. So let's review everything that we've accomplished. 25 teams from 14 schools registered to compete in this MFA Inter School 2021. 7 out of the 14 schools were new debate societies. More than half the teams in the competition were novice teams, which means the event was able to achieve its goal of encouraging the formation of new teams. Our chief adjudicator, one and only, Coach Shatab, along with Coaches Bo and Prayata. Point Avenue, we were the organizer of the event. The event was hosted in collaboration with MFA. Debate for All Vietnam, led by Coach Hewan and our hardworking team there, offered technical and logistical support. Event was hosted in the World Schools format. Tournament had 2 categories, Novice Championship and Open Championship. All the teams debated a total of 5 rounds, and the top 8 teams proceeded to open the championship, while the top 4 novice teams subsequently proceeded to Novice Championship. Novice Grand Final happened between Yotinhinbu Rana School and the ISB International School Bangkok. ISB won the Novice Championship. We also invited 15 judges and trainers from Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, US, South Africa, Kenya, Bulgaria, Poland, UK, Taiwan, and Australian universities to judge and train participants. Talk about the diversity and global debating community. The event was preceded by 3 days of training that offered new teams and experienced teams as an opportunity to be exposed to debating. We also launched a training platform to introduce debaters to competitive debating in World Schools format. And the final round today was hosted, and 2 teams debating were Anglo, Singapore International School, and Patumwan Demonstration School. Wow. Please give yourself a round of applause. In closing, I just want to say 3 things. Number 1, be proud of who you are, which essentially just means love yourself. Number 2, be proud of who you're with, fellow passionate debaters. And number 3, be proud of what you represent, a global debating community inspired to make a positive difference, one voice, one step, one initiative at a time. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech, Danny. That was very inspiring. So after we have the CEO of Point Avenue representing Point Avenue, we have the Honorable DJ Tani, who has been absolutely instrumental every step of the way, who has been proactive about pushing us to do our best, was excited about every single team that registered. And this is a level of involvement I am not used to. So thank you, Digitani, for being with us. We would love to hear from you now.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Danny. It's good to see you again, even though online. I'm very excited to be here. First of all, I'd like to congratulate on the great performance of both teams of Anglo Singapore International School and Patumwan Demonstration School, SRINAKHARINWIROT University, who successfully competed the final round, this inter-school debating championship 2021. I had a chance to listen in for the last part of the debate. I was so surprised that so many of our young people who are so capable could speak so fast, and it was hard. It was very challenging for me to try to keep up with your thoughts and your ideas. Once again, I congratulate you on our first debate that Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Thailand has ever organized, and I'm very proud to be working with Danny and Point Avenue, going back to the place and time that we met in Hanoi, Vietnam, and I'm quite happy, and it's my pleasure to be able to support the startup on EduTech like Point Avenue. I am very honored to be working with you and the work that you do in the region, not only in Hanoi and Vietnam, but also right here in Bangkok. As you may know, that this is the first inter-school debate tournament that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has hosted in collaboration with Point Avenue. We strongly believe that it's friendly competition will encourage our young students, young people, to think critically, and on our young generations to drive positive energy and transformation in our learning inside and outside of school setting. It was a pleasure to have witnessed the final round of the debate live on our Facebook today. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has supported a wide range of activities that we would like to create a global network of students and young professionals to make their voices heard in international relations. We are proud to be able to, at least in our small way, to support the thinking and the imagination of our young people right here in Thailand, but also to be able to connect you to some of our audiences around the world who are seeing our Facebook live today. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Danny, personally, and your team and the chief adjudicator and your trainers for supporting us, for making all this possible. And please remember that foreign affairs is just one click away. And please feel free to be a part of us. I hope that I see some of you in our diplomatic service soon. I hope it's not too distant of a future. It's one of our goals here at the Department of Information, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, is to support the connection between groups within our society, within our country, not only between people of different backgrounds, but also of people of different generations. This is very important to our people right here in Thailand as we battle the COVID crisis together, and also we also have experiencing some hardships economically. So my hopes and my expectations are with the young people. You are our hope, you are our expectation, you are our dream, and you are our future. So I hope to be able to do in a small way in my part, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in a small way to be able to support and to encourage our young people to drive forward and to prepare yourself to one day be able to support it and make positive changes even more in the future. So congratulations to all of our competitors, all of the participants to the debate once again. One of my old schools is also from Chiang Mai, is also part of the debate, and the team also participated in the debate. I'm very proud of them. I'm very proud of all of you, and I thank all of you for having us to be your supporter. Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for your address, Tijitani. So that ends the addresses we have for the closing ceremony. Now I will invite Bot, who was one of the chief adjudicators and one of the most prominent trainers in Thailand, who has been working for the community for years. Everyone knows Bot and loves Bot. So Bot will conduct the award ceremony, which is where we would recognize the top 10 open speakers and top 5 novice speakers. Both of these are great accomplishments that come after 5 very competitive rounds of debating. So take it away, Bot.
All right, thank you, Shitab. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me clearly. Thank you. Together with Shitab and Prauta, who serve on the adjudication panel, I would like to thank the MFA and Point Avenue for the contribution and endorsement. And we believe that everyone did well in this competition, and then that's why we are coming to an award. On a separate note, I and Prauta very much appreciate all your help in our Thai debating community on behalf that we are the national coach for this young generation to represent Thailand in the future and in the past year. So we indeed feel very grateful and offer our gratitude to your support in creating this extra platform during this COVID time for the kids to enjoy themselves and debate. So if you don't mind, Shitab, would you like to share the screen? So what I will do is I will read the top 10 best speakers, and then I will have Prauta, if she's comfortable, reading the other 5th novice best speaker. So for the top 10 best speaker for the open category, Thai at 9th place, we have Ping from Triamudom. Congratulations, Ping. Kamathon Pawiwan from Ekamai International Schools. Thai at 7th place, we have Tidat Nopapat from Patumwan Demonstration Schools and Sakawan Junrikun from Patumwan Demonstration School as well. At 6th best speaker, we have Thanasit Siwamokana from Anglo Singapore International School. At 5th best speaker, we have Yuan Bing Uy from Anglo Singapore International School. We have a tie at our 3rd best speakers. We have Raya Kanakakorn from Anglo Singapore International School. The other person tied at 3rd best speaker is Somporn Suphavirawong from Triamudom Siksa School. And we have a tie for the best speaker of our tournament, MFA Inter School Debating Championships. A big congratulations going to Pawarisa Manjit Jantra from Triamudom and Patraset Unjit Wattana from Triamudom Siksa School as well. Congratulations to the top 10 best speakers. Tata, would you like to do the 5 novice best speaker?
Sure. So for our 5th best novice speaker, we have Patnarin Kemanukun from Yotin Burana School. For our 4th best novice speaker, we have Pimwalan Petmani from Ekamai International School. Our 3rd best speaker is exciting. Nano Suresat Takun from Ekamai International School. And then we have a tie for the 1st best speaker in the novice category. We have Bing from Triam 3, Triamudom Success School, and our 1st best speaker, Kamathon Pawitwan from Ekamai International School. So congratulations to all teams and to all debaters, especially the novice teams who are stepping into such a platform for the first time. Congratulations, all of them.
We would also like to recognize again the novice finalists, that is Yotin Burana Schools, Congratulations, commiseration to them. And always Novice champion for the MFA Inter School Debating Championship 2021 is International School of Bangkok, ISB. Congratulations to our work well done. So that's really it from us. And now we pass it back to Shitab.
Thank you very much, Bot and Prao, and thank you for all the help throughout all of the events. So Claudia, if you're ready, we can proceed with the announcement for the open final.
Okay, first of all, congratulations to both teams for what was an excellent debate. We find a lot of arguments presented by both sides. Ultimately, the metrics which we used was which side weighed up their arguments and explain why they might be, for example, more realistic to achieve, or why the other side might create more collateral damage in achieving their policies. The second criteria was in terms of how well the arguments and the mechanisms were proven, which were exclusive on one of the other sides to achieve. And lastly, how well teams were responding to each other and were capable to rebuild their own material. In the end, we felt that the best speaker in this round, so the best final speaker, was the second speaker from the opposition team. So congratulations to the best final speaker, firstly, Raya Kanakakorn. I hope that I read that correctly. And now the champions announcement. Congratulations to the winners of the Inter-School Debating Championship 2021 final, to the opposition team, Anglo-Singapore International School. Congratulations to the champions and congratulations to the runner-ups as well, Patumwan Demonstration School. Both teams can be proud of their achievements, and that was excellent debate to watch and to judge. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. That concludes the closing ceremony of the first ever Ministry of Foreign Affairs Inter-School Debating Championship. Thank you everyone for tuning in. One last request we would like to make is we would like for you to follow the Line account for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They have a lot more events coming up and they're very serious about student engagement. It's been a pleasure to work with them. Not just Digitani, but also Sophia and other officers that I have constantly been in touch with. They've been working day and night to make this event happen. So please do follow them and follow all of their other initiatives because they are genuinely serious about engaging the Thai youth in a productive conversation. Thank you.